Hey, everybody, welcome back to Jersey First TV. Elizabeth Nader with you again tonight, bringing you another important show. I want to welcome Matthew Nielsen to Jersey First TV. Welcome, Matt.
Thanks for having me, Elizabeth. I really appreciate it.
Glad to have you here. And the viewers are about to find out why it's so important for them to sit with us for the next 20 minutes or 30 minutes to learn from you. Matt is an expert in some very important issues that we have facing this country, not only school choice, but also CRT. And CRT happens to be the issue we're going to discuss tonight. But Matt, right now you're Executive Vice President of Charter One, which helps charter schools get off the ground and succeed. And that has been a passion of your school choice has been, but also you're coming out with a book on CRT. So tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into this, why you are so passionate about both school choice and this subject we're talking about tonight, critical race theory.
Yeah, thank you so much for that introduction. And I'm happy to be here to talk about these issues because they are important. CRT is a hot topic right now. A lot of people are talking about it. School choice is becoming more and more acceptable and desirable for families, at least in some part because of CRT and related ideologies and philosophies that are being taught in public schools. And so I'm passionate about both of these things for, in some ways, the same reasons, but certainly, in other ways, very different reasons. I have different paths into both of these interest areas that have come over time. And so school choice on that front in particular, I've always been more, freedom-minded anyway. I think I was predisposed just to be accepting of the idea of being able to choose where your children attend a school and what they learn. And so that was always kind of there for me. But a few years back, I took a job here at Charter One and initially started working on just helping charter schools to get up off the ground, special projects and things like that. I don't do much by way of management, day-to-day management of charter schools. I'm really helping schools to get up and running. And so I interact a lot with potential board members who want to start a charter school. And I talk with them and learn about why they want to start a charter school. And these issues come up, the things that we're talking about today. And so it's been fun. It's been educational for me to learn more about the landscape, the statutes and laws from state to state and how those differ. Some of your viewers will know a lot about that because they're interested in school choice and those issues.
Well, we've had a lot of advocacy build up here in New Jersey. And you're right in that people are demanding more and more school choice because of the issues like critical race theory. And so, Matt, what we've seen here in New Jersey and just everybody, our viewers, Matt is actually in Arizona, but he's helping charter schools throughout the nation. But we have seen in New Jersey more and more the curriculum is something that the parents are concerned about. They feel as though the school is coming to the kitchen table when they shouldn't be and interfering with things that they want to teach their children themselves. So CRT obviously would be a reason why someone would start a charter school, that amongst other curriculum issues. Let's back up a little bit into critical race theory because I think there is a lot of confusion about it and maybe not enough education. We want people to be educated on where it comes from, the history of it, so that they can speak as intelligently as possible and help other people understand why it's an issue. So, Matt, let's back up a little bit and tell us what is the history and the origin of CRT?
So if you wanted to go all the way back, you could start back in the 1700s. You could go back that far. But just in its most recent incarnation, when it kind of gained the name critical race theory, that was really in the late 70s and early 80s. Richard Delgado, Derek Bell, and on the heels of those two men, Kimberly Crenshaw. These are kind of like the three names that if you want to know about the origins of critical race theory that you should know.
Yeah.
And in particular, Derek Bell was kind of the he spearheaded the effort early on. It grew out of another discipline, philosophical discipline, ideology, whatever you want to call it. I like using the word ideology because that
Mhm.
is more fitting,
Right,
in my
right.
opinion.
Mhm.
But Derek Bell really took up this idea of critical legal studies along with a couple of other men who were very well versed in it and pushing on this at Harvard University in the 70s. Um, but they took their ideas, as so often is the case, they took their ideas from other ideas and kind of pieced together these different philosophies and ideologies. Critical race theory is based on another, as I said, critical legal studies, but that it, in turn is based on critical theory.
Okay.
Critical theory was really kind of came into its own in about the 1920s and really late 20s and 1930s in Germany. And it's what if you just Googled the Frankfurt School, then you would learn all about critical theory and
Mm.
who the early thinkers were about critical theory. And basically, what that says, and you see this now in critical race theory because it's an outgrowth of that. First, it's a Marxian philosophy. You notice I'm
Right,
not saying Marxist
right.
um, because there's a difference, but it's a Marxian philosophy. It says that the only real thing that, and that I mean literally, the only real thing is power, and in this world, right? So I mean, physical objects aren't real; these are
Hmm.
projections of our psyche,
Right.
and onto the world. But the one real thing is power, and um, the the dynamic between people is always that of oppressor and oppressed. And
Okay.
this is where that Marxian philosophy
Right.
comes in. And so if you pull that through, just see how that manifests today in
Mhm.
critical race theory,
Yep,
same thing exists.
yep.
So your viewers will know that in schools today, what they're telling kids is that they are either the oppressor or they are oppressed.
Yeah.
And you can try, as I say, you can draw that all the way back to the 1920s in the Frankfurt
Wow.
School and
Wow.
even beyond, because this is Karl Marx in the
Yeah,
1800s. So that's kind of it in a nutshell.
yeah.
It's power is the only real thing. Power is distributed among people, um, and is mediated by race.
Mhm.
So uh, that distribution of power is totally dependent on how much melanin you have in your skin.
Wow.
And so that's the in a nutshell, that's what critical race theory is.
So that's such an interesting aspect of it, the historical aspect. You are either being oppressed or you are the oppressor. There are only two options, and it's all
Right.
rooted in power. So this is a concept that is now being pushed in the schools, but it's been pushed elsewhere also, has it not? Not just within our school system.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, no, this is really in every aspect of our lives today. And this, Elizabeth, and many of your viewers will know that President Trump, was it last year or about 18 months ago, he
Yeah.
said he outlawed the teaching of critical race theory in government institutions or in
Right.
government agencies. So it's there. We know that it's there. It's in teacher colleges, which is how it makes its way into school systems. And it's been there really since the about 1970, 1971, when a lot of teachings were coming up from Brazil, actually, from Paulo Freire. Um, some of your viewers may know about him. He was a critical pedagogist. It's another iteration, different spin on this.
Wow.
But yeah, it's in schools, it's in government agencies, it's in um, organizations. I mean, you've seen this as well, where diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts have been pushed into corporations, and trainings are presented um, to employees, and they have to complete those trainings in order to be onboarded or um, to get a raise,
Right,
to
right.
be all of those kinds of things. It really is everywhere.
It's everywhere. It's all CRT. And we're going to get back to the difference between equity and equality, because I think that's a key thing to understand. But you're writing a book on this, or you've written
Yeah.
it, you're going to publish it, it's going to be coming out. But you have an interesting story about why you did this. It's very personal. I want you to share that with the viewers.
Yeah. Thank you. Um, about 8 years ago, maybe a little over that, 8.5 years ago, my sister adopted a little boy, the cutest little boy you've ever seen. And he's black. Since then, I have I've gained a black niece.
Mm,
I have four other mixed race nieces and nephews, but all of this began with my nephew, and as when he was adopted, I thought he's going to have a difficult time. He could have a difficult time in
yeah,
his life, and I
right.
wanted to learn more about how I could be a good uncle to him
Mm,
and help him, and what he might go through in his life. And so I started reading some things, and I thought, some of them were very helpful, and I learned a lot there. And then others, I thought that just doesn't seem right to me. And I started, because they were based in critical race theory, and it just didn't feel right, because we
yeah,
have a lot of examples, as you know, Elizabeth, of extremely successful, wonderful, um, you know, people that have just made it,
right.
uh, that have much more melanin in their skin than I do,
Right, right. Or
or
me.
than you do.
Right.
And so
Yes.
I thought, gosh, this seems a little simplistic.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's more to it. And that's kind of what started me through
So this is
onto
a
the
personal
path.
passion really for your nieces and nephews, to be able to be in a world where they're taken at, face value really, right?
Hmm.
And no longer kind of propagate this lie. What's interesting about things that are slowly over time, gain speed in this society and attempt to change the way we think is often there's a little bit of truth wrapped in a greater lie. And certainly we don't
Yeah,
deny, the past that this nation has had and other
no
places in the
question.
world that's been very unfortunate, nor do we deny the need to make sure that all people are created equal and treated that
Yeah.
way. But the greater lie here is the difference between equity and equality, which seems to be a key aspect to understand about CRT. Can you go into detail about the difference there and the subtleties?
Yeah, and I want to just pull in one other aspect here, one other ideology, that philosophy. In this case, I think it's fair to call it a philosophy. It's called postmodernism.
Mm,
Critical race theory took on some of these postmodern ideas where language is power,
yeah.
and language is malleable. Again, a kernel of truth. Of course, that's the case. Um, but this philosophy says that you should use language to gain power.
Mm,
And so, equity and equality, they get confused all of the time. But this is, to me, the perfect example of how that postmodern element of critical race theory gets used.
yeah.
So, equity is, in short, it actually says that equality of outcome is what we're after.
Mm,
Equality says equality of opportunity is what we're
yeah.
after.
Yeah.
Now, for centuries, America has been the land of opportunity,
Right.
right? Not the land of equal outcomes.
Right.
That's been reserved for places like Soviet Russia
Right.
and Cuba and North Korea. And so that is a dangerous path to be going down.
Yeah.
But they get away with this because it sounds good. Equity sounds like equality.
Right.
The same thing goes for inclusion and diversity. These are good words. Why would you not
Why
want
would you fight that? Right.
to
Right.
include people?
Right.
Right. And so they do get confused. They are and it is a manipulation. It is a perversion of the actual concept,
Yeah.
but it's a means towards an end for them.
It's a very key aspect of this, and especially when you consider children who have not yet been taught to think critically, who
Right.
aren't really understanding the subtle difference, right, between equality and equity. And I believe it was
Yep.
Ronald Reagan that said that America promises equal opportunity, not equal outcome. And the power of that. I'm sure others have said something similar. So this is important for parents to listen to, and really any adult who needs to think critically. When you hear that word, challenge it. What
Yeah.
does it really mean? Is it the same as equality? And we should all, as moral individuals, want equality, but is
Of course.
equity actually a moral outcome, Matt? It really isn't. I mean, you described countries that focus on equity, and they're not doing so well, are they?
They really aren't. And history has shown us that again and again and again. But there's just a certain segment of our society, unfortunately, that wants to try again.
Yeah.
And it's a failed experiment, time and time again. And it's not just that, right? I mean, that's giving it too much credit. A failed
Yeah.
experiment. I
Yeah.
mean,
True.
millions and tens of millions of people have died at the hands of people that were seeking equity,
Yeah.
at least in that was their stated goal of
Okay.
what they were pursuing. But yeah, it is harmful. It actually harms the people that it says that it's going to help,
Mm.
in some ways more than the people that are supposed to be propping it up and
Let's talk
perpetuating it.
about that. Yeah, let's talk about that, because I think some really wise people, minorities, have stood up and said, "Hey, wait a minute. You profess to be trying to help us, but you're actually holding us back." And again, it deserves some
Yeah.
examination. So let's go into some examples and say, why is it that this is actually harmful to their very people they profess to be helping?
Yep. Fantastic. There's some great examples of this. There's actually a really great book. If your viewers want to pick this up, it was written a few years ago by Jason Riley. He's a writer for the Wall Street Journal. He's a senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute. Great writer. The book title is "Please Stop Helping Us."
Hmm. Oh, wow.
And it's a great book. He
Yeah.
goes over example after example of how government programs have actually done more harm for the Black
Mhm.
community than good. Um, if you want to dig really deep, and for a long time, I mean, there are dozens of volumes written by Dr. Thomas Sowell. A lot of your viewers will be familiar with him, but amazing work, empirical work, where
Mhm.
he goes into detail and has data to back up everything that he says. And if you're not into the heavy reading, then check out their Twitter accounts. They have some great Twitter accounts,
Yeah.
Facebook videos,
Right.
YouTube, amazing videos by both of those guys.
So there's a lot of information out there. Unfortunately, as parents, we have to do this work, even as just critical thinking adults. You have to look for the information that's not as readily available to say, wait a minute, what are they really telling us here? And how are we at this point, Matt? We have made so many advances as a country, as a world, but really as a country, we have made amazing advances in this area. I'm not suggesting that in any way we're perfect or that we don't have
Sure.
some more work to do. There's always room for improvement, but how are we at this point where this CRT approach is being pushed so heavily and it's really infecting every area of society? Why are we facing all of this now?
So your viewers will be familiar with this term, the slow march through the institutions, right?
Mm,
This has been going on for decades, where uh, radical academics in the the 1960s just flocked to universities and got their
mm,
bachelor's degrees, got their master's degrees, moved up and got their doctorates, and then began teaching in the universities all
mm,
throughout the countries, and not just through the United States. This is all throughout the West,
mhm.
the English speaking world, really. And but again, you can draw this back to philosophers like Kant, and that's really where a lot of this starts is with Kant and even Rousseau, and then up through Nietzsche and philosophers that, um, there's no doubt about it, we're extremely intelligent people,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of good in there, but you have to pick out the bad stuff.
Yeah.
What happened was these folks took the bad stuff and built on that
Right.
instead
Right.
of taking the good stuff and building on that. And so these ideas have been around for a really long time, but you're right, Elizabeth. The kind of coming to a head of all of these concepts now in the past couple of years, say 2 years, that didn't happen overnight. It
Yeah.
looks and feels like it's been in the past 18 to 24 months, but that's not the case. These ideas have been propagating through the universities
Yeah.
for a really long time.
Well, that is a cautionary tale. Once again, nothing happens overnight. We get places step by step. And what a good description of really the educators have been educated with
Hmm.
these theories. And those are, not necessarily your everyday teachers. They're people who are really just given often the curriculum to teach, but the educators who set the agendas, the
Right.
educators who infiltrate Washington, who have been to these universities and armed with this, and really, in some ways, I'm going to use the word brainwash in some cases. You can use whatever words you want to use, but really been sort of doubling down on all of this and decided that it needs to be part of how this nation sees things. So this is a great description of why it's happened, what it really is. I know there's a lot more to it, but now we're facing this on a daily basis. We're seeing
Yeah.
parents here in New Jersey at Board of Education meetings. They are upset. They are concerned. They are pulling their children out of school. And certainly school choice is one of the solutions here. But Matt, there are plenty of parents who cannot do that, or they don't
Yeah.
have choices right now. How do they better educate themselves? What are they saying to these people on Board of Educations? How do you recommend that they start to make some impact here and begin to really pull the cover back on this agenda?
Yeah, there's you're right. Not everyone has a choice, and certainly, New Jersey isn't known for its friendliness to school choice policies
No, not yet. Not yet.
We're working on that, right?
Yeah.
Um, but you're right. Not everyone has that option to go to a charter school or to use an education savings account to send their child to a
Right.
private school. So you're 100% right. What parents can do today is, yes, learn more about it. There's some very simple primers on critical race theory that you can find
Yeah.
online, and these are they're really everywhere now because it's become such an issue. Check YouTube, jump on YouTube, follow some people on social media that have children's best interest at heart and are talking about CRT.
Yeah.
There's, in particular, Christopher Rufo is a great follow on social media, on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. He's showing how CRT is being manifest in schools, and he writes about that.
Yeah.
I would do that. Start small, learn a little about what's going on.
Yeah.
Before you speak up too much in a board meeting, do a little more reading.
Right.
We want to make sure that people that are speaking are knowledgeable
Informed.
enough
Yes. Yeah.
and informed.
Well,
So yeah,
in some cases, I think some of these parents who have done their homework are really educating the people sitting on the other side
yeah,
of the desk, because, it's not as though there is a textbook that's going to be handed to your child that says the definitive guide to CRT on the front. This is not how it's happening. It's infiltrating at every level of curriculum in ways that you would be surprised. And I think once you understand what it is, the goal of this theory, the goal of the philosophy, the idea, even the simple idea of understanding equity versus equality, now
yeah,
suddenly your radar is up, right, Matt? And you're seeing it show up in the strangest ways. And that's, I think, important for parents to realize. They need to look at what their children are doing, right? They need to see what homework they're bringing home. What books are they reading?
yeah.
Hey, maybe go sit in for a few of those class sessions, right?
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. I want to make a quick note here that before about 60 days ago, maybe 90 days ago, we were being told, when I say we, I mean the public, parents, families, were being told that your kids aren't, or you're crazy. Your kids are not being taught critical
Right.
race theory and CRT in schools. You notice that stopped. And the truth is, no, they're not being taught critical race theory in
Right.
schools.
Right.
But no one was saying that,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
What we were saying was, we don't like the ideologies, the concepts, the ideas that you're teaching that are based on critical race theory.
Correct.
We don't like those in our kids' worksheets, math worksheets, when they come home
Yes.
from school. And so, but that's changed. You may have noticed, because these laws have been being passed around the country that ban critical race theory, racial
Mhm.
essentialism, these ideas, and in classrooms. And so now, in particular, the teachers' unions have come out and said, well, it's important that kids learn critical race theory in schools. So immediately that switch was flipped,
Yeah.
and they're no longer saying we're not teaching kids CRT. They're saying we must teach kids CRT.
Oh, the fight
So
is on. The fight is
it
on.
is.
And, you mentioned the legislative aspect too. We also need to look at fighting it from that standpoint, which is easier in some states than others. But we
Sure.
also need to look at the ability to ban it from that standpoint. Here we are
Yep.
again fighting the teachers union. We're not fighting teachers. We're fighting the teachers union. But if we allow this generation to be indoctrinated, it will be that much harder, will it not, Matt, to pull this out of our society?
Oh my
I think
goodness.
it's a clarion call right now. It's urgent right now that we all stand up, even if you're not a parent, and understand that, hey, it's not just in school, it's in your corporation. It's in the military, is it not? It's all over the place right now.
Absolutely.
So learn what it is, be aware. Now, Matt, you have this book that's coming out, and it's going to be a fabulous read. I'm sure anytime someone does something from a point of personal passion, it always makes it that much more effective. How can people find you, connect with you? Because there's so much more than we can talk about in half an hour. So give people that information where they can connect with your work.
Yeah. So really, the best spot to look for me is Educational Freedom Institute, EFI. That's the nonprofit that I founded. You can click on there, efinstitute.org, and then click on About Us, and you'll find me there. I'm most active. I know this isn't the most popular place to be, potentially among your viewers, but I'm on Twitter. And
We're still
so
there.
I'm active there. So great. Yeah.
Yeah,
If your viewers are on there, check me out there at Matthew Nielsen is my handle there. And I'm happy to interact with folks there. But I do share a lot of information on
that's
Twitter.
great. And then we'll find out about when the book comes out, which of course we will share with everybody. And Matt, we're going to have you back probably in the fall to talk about school choice. This is an
Awesome.
uphill battle in New Jersey, but like all battles we face in this incredible state, it's worth fighting. And I know people like you will educate us and help us do that. This is a tip of the iceberg, but it's a good primer on CRT. Matt, you're an awesome resource. I appreciate your time on all of this. I hope people connect with you, and we've all got to continue to fight for this. It's really the future of our country, our children, their minds, and how we are going to face things 20, 30 years from now. We'll look back and say, did we change it or did we not? Last word to
Yeah.
the viewers, Matt.
Well, Elizabeth, I appreciate you having me on here to talk about these important issues, school choice and CRT. Yeah, get informed. It's been my pleasure to be with you,
All
Elizabeth.
right. Thank you so much, Matt. And to my viewers,